Part 3 of Ultima Thule. This librivox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Karen Savage. Ultima Thule by Mack Reynolds. Part 3. In the outer office, Ronny said to the receptionist, "Commissioner Metaxa said for me to get in touch with Sid Jakes." She said, "I'm Irene Kazansky. Are you with us?" Ronny said, "I beg your pardon?" She said impatiently, "Are you going to be with the section? If you are, I've got to clear you with your old job. You were in statistics over in New Copenhagen, weren't you?" Somehow it seemed far away now, the job he'd held for more than 5 years. "Oh, yes," he said. "Yes, Commissioner Metaxa has given me an appointment." She looked up at him. "Probably to look for Tommy Paine." He was taken aback. "That's right. How did you know?" "There was talk. This section is pretty well integrated." She grimaced, but on her it looked good. "One big happy family, high interdepartmental morale, that sort of jetsam." She flicked some switches. "You'll find Supervisor Jakes through that door. 1 to your left, 2 to your right." He could have asked 1 what to his left and 2 what to his right, but evidently Irene Kazansky thought he had enough information to get him to his destination. She'd gone back to her work. It was 1 turn to his left and 2 turns to his right. The door was lettered simply, "Sidney Jakes." He knocked and a voice shouted happily, "It's open! It's always open!" Supervisor Jakes was as informal as his superior. His attire was on the happy-go-lucky side, more suited for sportswear than a fairly high-ranking job in the ultra-staid octagon. He couldn't have been much older than Ronny Bronston, but he had a nervous vitality about him that would have worn out the other in a few hours. He jumped up and shook hands. "You must be Bronston. Call me Sid." He waved a hand at a typed report he'd been reading. "Now I've seen 'em all. They've just applied for entry to United Planets. Republic. What a name, eh?" "What?" Ronny said. "Sit down, sit down." He rushed Ronny to a chair, saw him seated, returned to the desk and flicked an order box switch. "Irene," he said, "do up a badge for Ronny, will you? You've got his code, haven't you? Good. Send it over. Bronze, of course." Sid Jakes turned back to Ronny and grinned at him. He motioned to the report again. "What a name for a planet. Republic. Bunch of screwballs again. Out in the vicinity of Sirius. Based their system on Plato's Republic. Have to go the whole way. Don't even speak basic. Certainly not. They speak ancient Greek. That's gonna be a neat trick, finding interpreters. How'd you like the old man?" Ronny said, dazed at the conversational barrage, "Old man? Oh, you mean Commissioner Metaxa?" Sure, Sid grinned, perching himself on the edge of the desk. "Did he give you that drink of tequila during work hours routine? He'd like to poison every new agent we get. What a character." The grin was infectious. Ronny said carefully, "Well, I did think his method of hiring a new man was a little cavalier." "Cavalier yet," Sid Jakes chortled. "Look, don't get the old man wrong. He knows what he's doing. He always knows what he's doing." "But he took me on after only 2 or 3 minutes conversation." Jakes cocked his head to one side. "Oh, you think so? When did you first apply for interplanetary assignment, Ronny?" "I don't know. About 3 years ago." Jakes nodded. "Well, depend upon it. You've been under observation for that length of time. At any one period, Section G is investigating possibly 1,000 potential agents. We need men, but qualifications are high." He hopped down from his position, sped around to the other side of the desk, and lowered himself into his chair. "Don't get the wrong idea, though. You're not in. You're on probation. Whatever the assignment the old man gave you, you've got to carry it out successfully before you're full-fledged." He flicked the order box switch and said, "Irene, where the devil's Ronny's badge?" Ronny Bronston heard the office girl's voice answer snappishly. All right, Jake said. "I love you too. Send it in when it comes." He turned to Ronny. "What is your assignment?" "He wants me to go looking for some firebrand nicknamed Tommy Paine. I'm supposed to arrest him. The commissioner said you'd give me details." Sid Jake's face went serious. He puckered his lips. "Wow, that'll be a neat trick to pull off," he said. He flicked the order box switch again. Irene's voice snapped something before he could say anything, and Sid Jakes grinned and said, Okay, darling. But if this is the way you're gonna be, I won't marry you. Then what will the children say? Besides, that's not what I called about. Have ballistics do up a Model H gun for Ronny, will ya? Be sure it's adjusted to his code." He flicked off the order box and turned back to Ronny. "I understand you're familiar with handguns. It's in this report on you." Ronny nodded. He was just beginning to adjust to this freewheeling character. "What will I need a gun for?" Jakes laughed. "Heavens to Betsy, you babe in the woods. Do you realize this Tommy Paine character has supposedly stirred up a couple of score wars, revolutions, and revolts? Not to speak of having laid in his lap 2 or 3 dozen assassinations. He's a quick lad with a gun. A regular nihilist." "Nihilist?" Jakes chuckled. "When you've been in this section for a while, you'll be familiar with every screwball outfit man has ever dreamed up. The Nihilists were a European group, mostly Russian, back in the 19th century. They believed that by bumping off a few Grand Dukes and a Tsar or so, they could force the ruling class to grant reforms. Sometimes they were pretty ingenious. Blew up trains, that sort of thing." "Look here," Ronny said. "What motivates this Payne fellow? What's he get out of all this trouble he stirs up?" "Search me. Nobody seems to know. Some think he's a mental case. For one thing, he's not consistent." "How do you mean?" "Well, he'll go to one planet and break his back trying to overthrow, say, feudalism. Then, possibly after being successful, he goes to another planet and devotes his energies to establishing the same socioeconomic system." Ronny assimilated that. "You're one of those who believes he exists?" "Oh, he exists all right, Sid Jakes said happily. "Matter of fact, I almost ran into him a few years ago." Ronny leaned forward. "I guess I ought to know about it. The more information I have, the better." Sure, Jake said. "This deal of mine was on one of the Aldebaran planets. A bunch of nature boys had settled there." "Nature boys?" Back to nature. The trouble with the human race is that it's got too far away from nature. So a whole flock of them landed on this planet. They call it Mother of all things. They landed and set up a primitive society. Absolute Stone Age. No metals. Lived by the chase and by picking berries, wild fruit, that sort of thing. Not even any agriculture. Wore skins. Bows and arrows were the nearest thing they allowed themselves in the way of mechanical devices." "Good grief," Ronny said. "It was a laugh," Jakes told him. "I was assigned there as Section G representative with the UP organization. Picture it. We had to wear skins for clothes. We had to confine ourselves to 2 or 3 longhouses. Something like the American Iroquois lived in before Columbus. Their society on Mother was based on primitive communism. The clan, the phratry, the tribe. Their religion was mostly a matter of knocking into everybody's head that any progress was taboo. Oh, it was great." "Well, were they happy?" "What's happiness? I suppose they were as happy as anybody ever averages. Frankly, I didn't mind the assignment. Lots of fishing, lots of hunting." Ronny said, "Well, where does Tommy Payne come in?" "He snuck up on us. Started way back in the boondocks away from any of the larger primitive settlements. Went around putting himself over as a holy man. Cured people of various things from gangrene to eye diseases. Given antibiotics and such, you can imagine how successful he was." "Well, what harm did he do?" "I didn't say he did any harm, but in that manner he made himself awfully popular. Then he'd pull some trick like showing them how to smelt iron and distribute some corn and wheat seed around and plant the idea of agriculture. The local witch doctors would try to give him a hard time, but the people figured he was a holy man." "Well, what happened finally?" Ronny wasn't following too well. "Communications being what they were, before he'd been discovered by the Central Organization, they had a kind of council of tribes which met once a year. He'd planted so many ideas that they couldn't be stopped. The young people would never go back to flint knives once introduced to iron. We went looking for friend Tommy Payne, but he got wind of it and took off. We even found where he'd hidden his little space cruiser. Oh, it was Payne all right. "But what harm did he do? I don't understand." Ronny scowled. "He threw the whole shebang on its ear. Last I heard, the planet had broken up into 3 main camps. They were wailing away at each other like the Assyrians and Egyptians. Iron weapons, chariots, domesticated horses. Agriculture was sweeping the planet. Population was exploding. Men were making slaves out of each other to put them to work. Oh, it was a mess from the viewpoint of the original nature boys." A red light flickered on his desk, and Sid Jakes opened a delivery drawer and dipped his hand into it. It emerged with a flat wallet. He tossed it to Ronny Bronston. "Here you are, your badge." Ronny opened the wallet and examined it. He'd never seen one before, but for that matter, he'd never heard of Section G before that morning. It was a simple enough bronze badge. It said on it merely, "Ronald Bronston, Section G, Bureau of Investigation, United Planets." Sid Jakes explained, "You'll get cooperation with that through the Justice Department anywhere you go. We'll brief you further on procedure during indoctrination. You, in turn, of course, are to cooperate with any other agent of Section G. You're under orders of anyone with—" his hand snaked into a pocket and emerged with a wallet similar to Ronny's, "a silver badge, carried by a first-grade agent, or a gold one of supervisor rank." Ronny noted that his badge wasn't really bronze. It had a certain sheen, a brightness. Jakes said, "Here, look at this." He tossed his own badge to the new man. Ronny looked down at it in surprise. The gold had gone dull. Jakes laughed. "Now give me yours." Ronny got up and walked over to him and handed it over. As soon as the other man's hand touched it, the bronze lost its sheen. Jakes handed it back. "See, it's tuned to you alone," he said, "and mine is tuned to my code. Nobody can swipe a Section G badge and impersonate an agent. If anybody ever shows you a badge that doesn't have its sheen, you know he's a fake. Neat trick, eh?" "Very neat," Ronny admitted. He returned the other's gold badge. "Look, to get back to this Tommy Paine." But the red light flickered again, and Jakes brought forth from the delivery drawer a handgun, complete with shoulder harness. "Nasty weapon," he said. "But we'd better go on down to the armory and show you its workings." He stood up. "Oh yes, don't let me forget to give you a communicator. A real gizmo, about as big as a woman's vanity case. Puts you in immediate contact with the nearest Section G office, no matter how near or far away it is. Or if you wish, in contact with our offices here in the Octagon. Very neat trick." He led Ronny from his office and down the corridors beyond to an elevator. He said happily, "This is a crazy outfit, this Section G. You'll probably love it. Everybody does." End of part 3.